Aircraft launched from the sea, from carriers.
Air-to-air missiles, air-to-ground missiles, GPS-guided bombs. One of those frontline Hornets has everything you could need to really just go out there and wreak havoc.
These aircraft have left their mark on America's history in ways that few of us know. The idea of using a flying machine on the open sea was beyond almost everyone's imagination. Everyone except a middle-aged naval officer, convinced that planes and ships working together could become a powerful new weapon.
Captain Washington Irving Chambers is sort of an unlikely champion of aviation. He's a product of the 19th century, traditional naval warfare. He graduated from the Naval Academy not too far removed from the Civil War. But Chambers really expressed an interest in aviation. He wanted to look into it and study it. That's why he traveled to some of the air meets that were happening. He would go there to see what the latest technology in aviation was.
In the fall of 1910, Chambers attended an air show in Belmont Park, New York, in search of a pilot willing to try a grand experiment, launching an aircraft from a ship. Among the daredevils and showmen at the meet, one man clearly stood out, Eugene Ely.
Most people think early aviation, they think of aviators in these, leather jackets and flowing scarves and everything. And Ely, he just doesn't look the part of the dashing aviator. If you look at the pictures of him performing these feats, he was wearing a standard business suit. He had a bicycle inner tube wrapped around him for flotation. He wore a primitive football helmet. From Iowa, as far away from the ocean as you can possibly imagine, and someone who didn't really care for the water and didn't really like swimming.
But when Chambers proposed the idea, Ely, the man who didn't like water, couldn't resist.
In addition to being a pretty good pilot, Ely also had a surprising eye as an engineer. He gets the idea that he can build a wooden flight deck on a warship, like a cruiser or a battleship, and actually get it going fast enough that if he flies his airplane off the end of it, he can actually get it into the air and safely maneuver it. Well, back in the early 20th century, this is somewhat psychotic.
Soon after their meeting, Chambers outfitted the cruiser, the USS Birmingham, with a makeshift wooden deck. Built to Ely's specifications, the platform was only 83 feet long and 24 feet wide. On the morning of November 14th, 1910, rain squalls filled the sky. Ely waited nervously. Finally, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the weather cleared.
So Ely climbed aboard and revved up the engine as much as it would go. And as he went over the edge of the deck and out over the water, he actually descended a little bit quicker than he thought. He thought he might crash, and the wheels actually grazed the water as he took off from Birmingham. But picked up enough flying speed that the wind went beneath the wings, developed some lift, and he was able to take off and fly to shore.
Chambers was pleased, but he knew the hardest part was yet to come: landing a speeding airplane on a rolling ship. Again, Chambers relied on Ely's practical know-how.
Ely was facing the prospect of flying into the back of the smokestacks of the ship, so he had to come up with some way of stopping the airplane.
So what they did is they had sandbags connected by ropes, and these ropes were strung across the wooden deck at a series of intervals. And there were a series of hooks beneath the aircraft, and as these hooks snagged on those ropes, the weight of the sandbags there would bring the plane to a stop as it hit the deck.
The weather on January 18th, 1911 was cold. Ely flew from an air meet to the USS Pennsylvania, 10 miles offshore.
Eugene Ely made his approach to the cruiser Pennsylvania and successfully got into what is now referred to as the proper glide slope. Hit the deck, and the ropes caught the hooks on the bottom of his aircraft and eventually brought the plane to a stop. And it was just an amazing event. No one had ever seen anything like this before. I mean, you have to think at that time, you're only about 7 years removed, 8 years removed from the Wright brothers' flights. And here you have sailors seeing an aircraft land aboard their ship. It was something that was, really, observing it must have been an experience to remember.
And the amazing thing is, the metaphors laid out by Ely of the flight deck, of the arresting gear, of the tail hook, are things that we still use 100 years later. The man was a visionary.
But Eugene Ely would not live to see the magnitude of what he'd achieved. Within months, he was killed in a plane crash during an air meet.